And a couple more stories from around the world before we go to break here. With the two chief weapons inspectors heading back to Iraq, the Iraqi government says it will come away convinced, or rather the weapons inspectors will come away convinced that Iraq is cooperating. Hans Blix, Mohammed El-Baradei plan to arrive in Baghdad on Saturday. They are expected to push Iraq to allow U-2 overflights by Americans and to permit inspectors to privately interview Iraqi scientists. These are issues that have been there for a while now. Meantime, in Baghdad, more preparations for war. Saddam Hussein and son met today with commanders of the Jerusalem Army, a volunteer force Saddam created early in the Palestinian uprising. The commanders told their president, not surprisingly, they're prepared to fight street by street, house by house, to defeat any American invasion. And a late development tonight in the showdown with North Korea. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld has issued a prepare to deploy order to send U.S. bombers to Guam within easy striking distance of the Korean Peninsula. This is a preliminary step, but it is the final step before actually sending them on their way. Later on this special edition of Newsnight from Houston, has space lost its luster for our children? Up next, a man who's covered a few big stories along the way will be joined by CBS News correspondent Bob Schieffer.
The future of humans in space. CNN tomorrow in the crossfire join the debate. Some say robots could conduct missions instead of people. Are the scientific rewards of human exploration worth the risk? You decide. CNN tomorrow, 7 Eastern.
If this isn't an old saying, it ought to be. The better the journalist, the better the off-duty stories he or she has to tell. It follows, therefore, that Bob Schieffer must have the best yarns of all, and he's written them down. The collection is called This Just In, What I Couldn't Tell You on TV. Bob Schieffer joins us now in Washington, which has been his lookout post for a long time, though through a lot of presidents, a lot of national up and downs. It's good to have you with us, Bob. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron.
Let's talk about the tragedy of this weekend. It seems to me, and feel free to disagree, you won't be the first, that we see this all different than we saw the tragedy of Challenger 17 years ago.
Well, I think that's right. Number one, we have just gotten over 9/11, and we're still kind of, I think, in kind of a state of shock about that. But, you know, Aaron, what strikes me about this, and I'll bet you had the same thought that I did, when I first heard about this, the first thing that went through my mind was this some kind of act of terrorism? Terrorism has become so much a part of our life. It's so much of a sign of the times, it seems to me, that anytime anything untoward happens these days, we think it's the act of terrorists. And I guess that's another way of saying it helps us to understand how much the terrorists have already impacted on our lives, and in a funny kind of way, how much they've already taken from us.
That's the terrible part about it. We all have said so many times, we've heard our political leaders say, if we do A or if we fail to do B, then the terrorists have won. But in a very uncomfortable way, deep inside us, the terrorists have won a little at least.
Well, they've taken part of our way of life. There's no getting around that. I mean, when you have security cameras, you know, at the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial, and when something terrible happens, the first thing you think about, did the terrorists do it? They've done a lot more to us than we sometimes realize, I think.
It, to me at least, seems like months ago the president delivered his State of the Union speech. It wasn't. It was a week ago.
Yeah.
In that speech, it was really two speeches as we heard it. Did you hear anything that indicated to you this president does not intend to go to war?
No. I think he left himself very little wiggle room, it seems to me, Aaron. He said Saddam Hussein must disarm, or we intend to disarm him. Now, having said that, I think there's still a faint hope within the administration, and I know that some of the ranking officials still believe there is a chance that he may go voluntarily, and I think that's what some of this buildup you're seeing is all about. I think, you know, where you're seeing these war plans being leaked about the kind of lethal attack that we intend to unleash if he does not go. Maybe that's what part of that is about, is to give him one more chance. I think we're going to keep the pressure on until the very end. My guess is We will not move in there until at least, well, we know that Colin Powell is going to make a speech this week to lay out some of the proof that he says will show why Saddam Hussein poses such a threat. But I would guess after that, the president will make another speech if indeed we do go in. But at this point, if he does not disarm, it appears to me that there's going to be some military action.
That's the heavy lifting. Let's talk about the book a bit. Why'd you write it? What are the stories that that you wanted to tell that you weren't able to tell? Are these behind-the-scenes tales?
Yeah, these are really, Aaron, what these stories are, they're the stories that reporters tell each other at the end of the day, sometimes after a little refreshment. When you're covering a big story, the stories of how you got the story, the stories of the mistakes you made, the funny things that happened along the way. I always found that one of the best parts of journalism, and frankly, I thought they were kind of funny, and I thought others might find them funny as well. So that's what these stories are about. I guess if there's a serious side, I hope people would come away from this book with a little better understanding of how we as journalists operate, why we do what we do, and why we go after the stories the way we do. But most of all, I hope they'll see that I've had a wonderful life in journalism. It's been a lot of fun for me, and I hope they'll understand and come to see a little bit better how the press operates.
Well, Bob, we admire your work greatly. We wish you nothing but great success with the book, and thanks for your time tonight. Bob Schieffer.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
CBS News. And next on this special edition of Newsnight from Houston is Space, the Final Frontier for Our Children. Or have they forgotten about it? From Houston, this is Newsnight. We are of that generation that watched Alan Shepard and John Glenn's close the space gap and cheered. We were standing guard duty in boot camp the day men landed on the moon, and we remember looking up in wonderment. Those were glory days and important days, and on these sad days, it's hard not to wish that today's kids, including our own, could have that moment. We talked to kids today and listened. At Fowler High School in Syracuse, New York, the kids working on Charlotte Archibald's science project lived and breathed for one thing, their experiment with ants aboard the Shuttle Columbia. 3 seniors and a sophomore laboring for more than 3 years.
It really, really hurt us to know that both our experiment was up there, but the 7 lives that were lost. So it was very, very painful.
But if the students at Fowler were devastated by the destruction of Columbia, around the country, even in Houston, home to the Shuttle program and the Space Center, most students we found had no idea at all that the shuttle was even aloft.
How many of you knew there was even a space shuttle up before the accident?
I didn't know that the shuttle was up there, and I had no idea what they were doing until it came down. I really don't think about the space station on a daily basis or even a yearly basis.
In New Jersey, at Demarest Middle School, space exploration, it seems, hardly matters.
We joke around with it, like we probably talk about E.T. or something, and just play around with it, but not too serious though.
And we found the same in Chicago at Nichols Middle School, which says an awful lot about the space program and children.
I don't think about stuff like that. Like, we know what's out there because we learn about it in science and stuff like that. But really, I really don't think about it because it don't really affect me.
That's not meant as a harsh indictment of kids. Space really doesn't affect most of the adults in the country either these days. And science teachers like Lisa Chestnut in Houston know it is an uphill struggle to create interest in the space program.
Do you hear it, you know, on a regular basis, a daily basis? I don't hear it often. But if I sit down and talk to them, or if we do different projects or science fair projects, you know, some people are interested.
But if this makes you think the future of space science is bleak, these kids will tell you you are wrong. Nearly all we talked to wanted manned exploration of space to continue for the most basic of reasons.
One time space was just a big blue sky up there, and now it's so many different possibilities and so many different different chances and choices that can be made with all the knowledge that we gained and all the knowledge that we can gain in the future.
Pure music to the ears of the kids back at Fowler High in Syracuse. They are grown up enough to know that the reason their experiment is getting attention now is because of the awful tragedy that befell Columbia.
It's so ironic because we wanted the attention, but not in this way. We wanted the attention in a positive way, and it took a tragedy for us to get any attention at all.
The story from Houston tonight, memorial service tomorrow. The president will be here. Our coverage begins at 12:30 Eastern Time. We hope you'll join us. Until then, I'm Aaron Brown. Good night for all of us at Newsnight.